All right, so yeah, we're back with another episode. Today I'm sitting down with Ryan Wilhelm, who's a career counselor at Ohio State. Also was my career counselor for the couple of times that I've been there. Thank you for sitting down with me today.
No problem.
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to talk to you, and I feel like I've said this every time I've talked to somebody, but one of the things that came up the most that college students were stressed out about was what happens after college, right? So finding a career and finding a direction. Um, and finding a direction that's beyond just finding your major, right? Because there are a million majors at Ohio State. There are a million more career. It feels like there are like a million more careers. Um, and so I think one of the first things that I wanted to ask you and talk to you about is, right, I came into Ohio State very much, I had no idea what I wanted to do after college, right? I knew I liked school. Um, and I knew that I had some interest in it. I liked history. I knew that I had some interest in school, but what came after that, I really hadn't done much thinking about, other than I didn't want to be a doctor because I don't like science, right? So I guess the first thing I would ask you is, when you're sitting down with a student who may have no idea like that, but has some interest, how do you sort of start to bridge that gap between school interests and things that can come after school?
Great. So, and if I don't answer this question, because I'm going to go off on a tangent to start in the beginning. So if I don't answer the question,
Totally.
bring me back in, right? So, the first thing I think that is important is to help them get accepting of the unknown, right? So, like, they feel very often, students who end up in my office feel like they have to know, like there's something wrong with them for not knowing, like they're in a quad with 3 other students and those students know, and so then they feel like something's wrong, right? So the first step is really getting comfortable in going slowly, getting comfortable in not knowing, getting comfortable in not having control, right? Because it just happens very often when you're trying to figure out what you want to do. It just happens that maybe you didn't bump into the thing you want to do first, right? So when a student comes into our office, what we do, every counselor is slightly different. Every consultant is slightly different. So what I like to do is I like to start from scratch, try to get them comfortable, build a connection, and talk about their background, right? And we will talk about the experiences that they've had in their life in terms of, what they do in high school, what did they do in, what have they done so far at OSU, what have they done in terms of work, what did they do in terms of hobbies, those kind of things, right? And we'll try to pick out what are the positive experiences that they want to keep having, what are the positive things that came out of those, and then what are the negative things that they want to avoid, right? We will look at their personality often, not all the time, but we'll look at their personality often and try to kind of see where their personality might connect. We will look at their values and see what's most important to them. For me, values is, we do a series of things. Values is the most important thing. And the reason that values is the most important thing is because we often make decisions based on other people's values. Our parents might say, they might really like finance and we don't like finance, but our parents make it seem so logical, so we want to go in that direction, right? Or vice versa. We love finance and they don't. It is so easy to see someone doing something and then we want to catch up, right? So for me personally, I went to law school. There was a part of me that wanted to go to law school, but I went to law school because I wanted to catch up with friends. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to have more of a prestigious path, right?
Sure.
And when I got there, I didn't want to be there. And I realized that I didn't look at my values, and I didn't sit down and realize, like, really for me, what I wanted to do is work with people and try to make an impact in their lives and try to help them.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't going to get that from law school, and law school wasn't a good fit for me. So I had to go and kind of realize that. But I think values, getting a good base in values is really important. We have also kind of switched a little bit of what we do, and we have started focusing on challenges and thinking about what are the challenges that students might want to solve in the world, right? And then backtracking. So often students can say, these are the areas where I'd like to make an impact. And then we can backtrack and say, okay, well, what are jobs that make an impact in that area? What are majors that you can take to get to those jobs? And then, in the end, it's really thinking about putting ourselves in a position not to necessarily be looking for one career that we'll fall in love with and that we'll be with, for the next 30 years, but thinking about, what are the elements of a career that we want? Thinking
Right.
about what are the, what do I, maybe like, let's imagine somebody wanted to go into medicine, right? But they couldn't pass organic chemistry at OSU. They can take a step back and say the elements that I want out of medicine were, I want to help people, I like science, I want to make an impact, I want to work in a hospital setting.
Mhm.
And maybe they can't get into medicine, they can't get into med school, but if they take a step back, they can say, what can I do that checks off a lot of those boxes, that
Right.
a lot of those elements. So
Totally.
hopefully that answered your question. I feel like it
Yeah.
jumped around a little bit, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah,
So
totally. It did. And there are a couple things that I can jump off from there. And I think the first thing that you mentioned that I think is really important to talk about because it's so real is the feeling pressure from some sort of outside person to do a certain career, right? So feeling whether it's your parents, right? Your parents are both engineers and but you love art, but your parents are engineers, right? And how do you help a student work through that sort of pressure from someone who could be is obviously means a lot to them, but also could be paying for their school, right?
yeah.
How do you help students work through that and figure out what's for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's always difficult for sure, right? So we try to normalize it, right? So that one of the big things is when we look at those personality things, those values things, we try to have the student first look at their own. And then if they are having some external pressure, think about like, what would their mom answer, right? So if their mom was pressuring them to go in a certain direction, right? Maybe if we looked at your mom's personality and your personality, you're going to see like, okay, this makes sense why mom would push me to engineering because engineering fits her personality, right? But my personality doesn't match up. So that's one thing that we try to do. A lot of it is recognizing that parent is there. They're trying to provide support in a way and trying to our as a father of two young kids, my number one role is to try to keep my kids safe. So it's possible that the first thing that they're thinking is, how do I keep my kids safe, right? And then they're like, oh well, this is a safe degree, and that parent might not know a ton about art, right?
Right,
So
right.
if that student can come in to us or just come up with a plan and say, okay, here's what I would do with my art degree, here are a bunch of routes I can go, here are places that are hiring, here are what those jobs are. That parent may have never known a thing about art and what you can do with art, and that student can come in and educate the parent and say, well, actually it does feel a little bit more concrete, it does feel a little bit more real, there is a path towards that, with art that I can go in, that maybe you just don't know about, mom, and I can educate you about, and then we
Right.
can.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's super important, right? Because I have so many friends who have that issue, right? And have that issue with majors, but also right career. And I think one of the other things that's really interesting, and I probably know the answer to this because we've done so many of these exercises, but I was wondering, so I think there are when you were talking about values, right? And you were talking about the things that you value, there are there are obviously like personal I want to say morals, right? And there are also things like making money, right? And
Mhm.
being able to travel and having a family, right?
Yeah.
How when you're working with students, how do you do you put emphasis on certain things over the others? You help students figure that out.
Uh,
How do you work with those things?
That's a great question. We don't try to put emphasis on certain things over the others. We try to kind of have that roll out as they see fit. We do try to welcome them to um, to value things that sometimes they feel guilty valuing, right? So
Mm.
sometimes I'll work with a student and they'll say, like, I really want to do this, and I know I shouldn't say it, but I really want to make a lot of money too, right? And we're like, great, right? So write down that you want to make a lot of money. Let's put down that you want to make a lot of money, because if you ignore that part of you, then you're going to get into a career, not make a lot of money, and then
Right.
feel like you're in a bad space, right? So sometimes it can feel like you are you shouldn't want something, but you do want it. So that's okay, right? And a lot of times it's a balance, right? It's a balance between do I want to make a lot of money, or do I want to, what am I willing to give up, right? So maybe it's, if someone wants to go into art, but they want security, right? So they have to take a step back and say, am I willing to give up security to head into the art world that might not be as secure as accounting, right? Excuse me. Um, so there's a lot of give and take when you're thinking about your values and what directions you want to go. There's also something that's really, really important is recognizing that we are approaching all of this stuff with our first step with ignorance, right? So we don't know what we're talking about quite yet. We might have read about it, we may have talked about it real, shortly with somebody, right? But we're approaching it without all the knowledge that we will have. The very first day of the job, even if you go to school for it, even if you've interned the very first day of the job, you're going to learn something about that job that you had no idea about, and then you're going to learn more, and you're going to learn more. So, being willing first to explore and to say, these are the things that sound interesting, right? So, industrial organizational psychology, or organizational development, or whatever it is, right? And then saying, okay, I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to discover what are the worlds I want to explore. And whatever that world that is, they're going to have companies that are in that world, or organizations, or nonprofits, or whatever it is, schools. And they're going to have people in those schools that are doing certain jobs, and they're going to have certain jobs in those areas, right? So as you start exploring, those are going to uncover more and more and more. So you're going to start out with just an idea, like, there's a football player right behind you, right? So you might say, like, I want to be in sports, or I want to work for Ohio State sports, right? That's, as you go into sport industry or whatever it is, you'll start discovering all of the layers to that. There's sports information, there's sports enterprise, there's ticket sales, there's people who help run the office on the day-to-day. There's people who help run the facilities. There's people who do that for rec sports, for swimming, for all of this, right? So there's all these layers to it that at the first start, you might say, I like sports. And then as you start digging, you're going to start finding your niche around that area.
Totally. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. We're starting to talk about the next thing that I really want to talk to you about, which is once you start to identify a general area, how do you, all right, I know from, you can just look at the career counseling website and see how much emphasis you guys put on doing informational interviews. So I guess something that, and I know that from working with you guys, and so how, first, can you explain briefly, like in your view, what a good informational interview is, and then how a student can go about approaching something like that?
Awesome. So good informational interview. So it's we want you, when you start to explore, to just start finding people out in the field who might be able to give you greater knowledge, to essentially lessen that ignorance, right, about what the field's all about, right? People who did that work today, people who hired people to do that work today, right? So you get a good window into what they're looking for and who they're hiring, what you should be doing, all that stuff, and if it's work you want to do, right? So essentially, a good informational interview, find somebody out in the field, and this can be really anyone, right? So we want you to leverage family members, friends, professors, right? Let them all know, tell them what you're interested in. The odds of them knowing somebody who is out there is relatively high, who's doing that work, right? So somebody's going to know somebody, right? The second piece of that is utilizing things like LinkedIn, like Handshake, like Alumni Fire, right? Which Ohio State has a gigantic alumni base, right? So it's over 500,000 now, right? That are out there. And Buckeyes love to help Buckeyes, right? So it is leveraging LinkedIn, especially, to make these connections and to find people who are doing the things you want to do. And then just reaching out is a great way to do it. What that looks like, I kind of jump past that question. It can be really simple, 20-minute, 30-minute conversation. You shoot them a message on LinkedIn, you shoot them an email, you give them a call if you happen to know the person. Just ask them to sit down. You don't have to wear a suit. You can dress business casual. It can be, you don't have to, get fancy, right? If eventually we're doing these in person again, great, hopefully go to where their workplace is, right? Then you get to see their workplace a little bit. And then you just write down questions, anywhere from like 5 to 15 questions, right? So we usually give a sheet of potential questions to the students, but we want them to adapt that for themselves. When we're thinking about types of questions, we want them to focus on 3 main things, right? So the first thing is, what's this work like? Do I really want to do this work, right? So what's your average day like? What's your favorite thing about, your job? Those kind of questions. Right. We also want them to tactfully mention things about themselves that they've done, right? So when they're asking questions, say things like, I've had great leadership roles at Ohio State. Can you tell me about how leadership is a part of your job, right?
Right.
And then that person is finding out things that that they would find out if they were interviewing you for a job, right?
Right.
The second thing we want them to focus on in terms of questions is, how do I get there, right? So this person, at the very least, knows how to get that job because they're in that job now, but they are either the gatekeeper or they know a gatekeeper to that job because they were able to get into it. So
Right.
asking things, specific things, right? Like, what degree do I need? What skill sets should I be getting? Where should I be interning? Things like that, right? All great. We never want you to ask for an internship or a job or anything like that. We want this to feel more like it's becoming more of like an advisor mentor relationship. And once
Right.
you ask for something concrete, it becomes more of like a business relationship, right?
Totally.
And the third type of question is just, how do you expand that network, right? So if I met with Charlie and I asked him all about his company,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden, it's time for the end, and I say, thank you so much, Charlie, for this. This has been fantastic. I want to find out everything I can about this field. Is there anyone else out there that you suggest I talk to, right? Charlie's probably going to lead me in a direction of some good people that he's connected with. And then I
Right.
just keep expanding my network, right?
Yeah.
Um, we, in a sense, what we're trying to do is we're starting out our search without a lot of data, and we're trying to just keep adding data and information so that, at the end, we're still making an educated guess. We won't have all the data, we won't have 100% data to really make, a perfect decision, but
Hmm.
we will collect enough data to pick one that's in the lead. And then when we can pick one that's in the lead, we just feel more confident going in that direction. We're still going to discover more. We're going to bump into other things, but we'll feel more confident for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and I think when you people like talk about networking, right, to someone, and that's something that honestly is very much out of or when I came to college was very much out of my comfort zone. When you say that word, right, I think that's something that can be very intimidating to people. But actually, from what I found, it's just talking to people who generally want to talk to you, right? Generally,
Yeah,
people want to talk to. All remember being in college, and all remember being stressed about jobs and all that
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. And
So yeah,
it's
but
super flattering for someone to come and say, like, your job seems interesting, I want to learn more about it, right?
totally.
So like, that's great, right? If the job's boring, no one's coming to check that out, right? So but if someone's saying, I want you to be my mentor, I want you to, I want you to tell me about your life, right? That is flattering, and people are often willing to do it. It
Yeah.
is a awesome tool for exploration, but it's also an awesome tool for job searching, because
Mhm.
many jobs go to people that they already know. And so what you're doing, if you do this to explore and then you bump into something and you're like, wow, this is a great field. Now all of these people know you, and you know all these people in the field. So when it comes time for an internship, when it comes time to get a job, they're already thinking about you. So
Right.
there's two pieces to doing that networking that are helpful.
That's super. That's super helpful. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. And honestly, so I'll do a quick plug. Um, Career counseling was something that was unbelievably helpful for me, and it helpful for me to figure out my direction. But also, right, you guys help with resumes and mock interviews, and you help me set up my LinkedIn, like do all sorts of things. And I don't know if I'm missing anything that you guys do.
Yep.
Um, but
I don't know. You hit on it.
knowing is helpful and can I don't know, it's no matter what stage you're at in figuring out what it is, right? I think I would always suggest it to people.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having us come in and chat about it. And yeah, if students need help with exploration, if they need help with those pieces, we are here for that.
Totally. Thank you so much.